Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Linn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Good day and welcome to Ethical Perspectives on the News. My name is Linn Tabak. I will moderate today's discussion. Our subject is the challenges of serving on a school board. We've seen in the news in recent months scenes from school boards around the country, some meetings very contentious. But we know that these members of school boards are serving, I believe, without pay. They're working long hours. They're trying to balance the interests of parents and students and teachers and working with constraints of budget and the law and so on. So I thought it would be helpful to you, our audience, to learn more about who is serving, why they're serving, what kind of work they're doing for us. I don't hope to resolve the current controversies that we see on the news at some school board meetings in other parts of the country, but just to inform ourselves about who's doing this work, what kind of work they're doing. We have with us today two guests with experience in this area. One is a neighbor of mine, and we're recording this program on an election day here in Linn County, Iowa. Tom Wieseler is on the ballot, so I was sure to get to the polling place before I came here to make this program. And Tom has a lot of experience in Mount Vernon with the school board there. Steve Sovern is I'm meeting for the first time for this program, and Steve is an attorney, a mediator, and also has experience with school boards. I think he's in Cedar Rapids. So I'm going to ask each of you to say a little bit more about yourselves, maybe a little bit more about your background, and if you wish, why you chose to accept our invitation to talk about what I hope we agree is an important topic. So Steve, why don't you go first here?
Well, sure, and thanks, Linn, and Tom, good to be with you, and it is an important topic, and I guess I bring a historical perspective here in the sense that I actually served on the Cedar Rapids School Board 50 years ago. I think I remain the youngest person ever elected to the Cedar Rapids School Board at age 28. But I became interested in public service there and went on and served in the Iowa Senate on the Education Committee and ran for Congress, quite unsuccessfully, however. But I bring an interest in sort of the public communications side of school boards. And I have such huge respect for people willing to serve. If I can remember one phrase or one question that was asked of me way back when I was on the school board is, why would you take on this thankless task? And I would always respond that, oh, there's more thanks in this work than I've ever experienced, and that's true since, because it's dealing with the future of our kids and it's doing work with good people with good intentions. So it's a real thrill to be talking about it again. So one of my more favorite tasks.
Very good. And Tom, I know you, but I don't know a lot about your resume here. So teach me some more about yourself and tell our audience about your work with school boards and so on.
Sure. Well, thank you for the invitation, first of all, Linn, and thanks, Steve, about learning a little bit more about your background. And I have been on the school board in Mount Vernon for 27 years. So it's 9 election cycles is what I went through at that time, and now it's a 4-year cycle. And during those 27 years, it was basically 2 generations of students from kindergarten to graduation into alternative kindergarten to graduation. So I followed 2 generations of students through. Wanted to take a break a few years ago, got off school board. And after a couple of years, I still had the desire to still do something. I think I still had some zip in my legs to do something. And I ran for city council, was elected twice to city council. And as Linn referenced today, I'm running for mayor in Mount Vernon. So I want to keep that civic engagement going on. And the reason I kind of got involved with this was I was on a career track in my first career that involved relocation every 2 years, 4 years, buy a new house, moving on to another state, whatever. And when we came to Mount Vernon, my wife and I soon realized that this is where we want to engage, or this is where we want to live. And the best way to get to be living in that district was to engage actively. And my wife took some things that she got engaged in. And then I did I took on the mantle of getting involved with our children in their school district. So I got involved with that, learned the ropes. And I like to use the analogy of a baseball game. I was in the stands for a few years, and I decided to get onto the team, onto the field. And for 10 years as president, I was the pitcher or whatever, the manager. And I don't regret it for a minute. Steve talked about the thanks for a job that involves a lot of time, no pay, and sometimes a lot of headache. My payoff is every graduation day. And for 27 years, I either sat in the back of the auditorium, or I sat in the bleachers, or I sat on stage, or I sat with the parents of graduates. And that was the payoff to me, those 27 graduation ceremonies that I went through. And I wouldn't pass that up for anything. So that's my background, and retired from 43 years in one career in college dining. And now I'm 4 years into the Mount Vernon Bank. So that's my background.
Very good. Okay, let's talk just a little bit about the mechanics. If somebody wants to serve on a school board, who's eligible? What does it take? Do people campaign for this office? What do they do to get onto a school board? Tell us a little bit about that.
I pitch in on that just because when you mentioned campaigns, and this is back when I ran, which is a long time ago, but I know the other school board members exchanged comments about, gee, this guy's running for school board. We've not seen that happen. I actually put up a billboard, if you imagine. And before that, the Chamber of Commerce Education Committee had usually provided a name, and a school board member would talk about retiring. The chamber would give them that name, and that person would become an incumbent in the next election. So, but the answer to your question really, and the most important thing is virtually anybody in the district can run. Fortunate for me, there wasn't an age requirement. And I've found over time, both with direct experience and then when serving in the Iowa Senate on the Education Committee and interacting with school board, that just good, decent citizens that want to help is basically the criteria. It takes a lot of study and a lot of work, but it is just amazing when you stop to think about the no pay and lots of hard work and getting background information. So many good people are willing to serve.
Steve, you broke the curve if you got a billboard for a school board election. So
well, it might have benefited me that my family owned a billboard company.
Whatever edge you can get. So the two questions that
you campaigned by helicopter in Mount Vernon, didn't you, Tom?
With regard to the question of who can run, yes, the citizenship, I think it's age 18 if you want to get technical, and hopefully having some intrinsic desire to want to run. But this is where it's interesting. Well, I want to mention that with open enrollment being such a large concept in the state now over the last couple of decades, even though your child can open enroll to another district and some of the money can go to that other district, you cannot run as a board member in that other district. So that's a little bit of a distinction there. Okay. And with regard to the second part of your question, Leon, about campaigning, what is campaigning? Yard signs for a new candidate who wants to get his name familiarity out there, maybe is a valid point. But I will tell you this, that after going through a couple elections, I don't think, especially in Mount Vernon, where we have a pretty discerning voter base, that you're not going to change anybody's opinion in the 3 weeks before an election with yard signs. Okay. But you will determine their opinion, get their vote based upon the 3 years of work that you've done, meeting in and meeting out, month in and month out, in the years preceding that election. So that to me is campaigning. And I don't know if you consider this campaigning, but take advantage of the opportunities that are available to you. I speak to Lions Club and Rotary. They cannot be political based, but I talk about a civic or a school related topic with those organizations. And just get out some face time there. I never pass up an opportunity to be on the League of Women Voters panels, and that's something that Mount Vernon is huge on. That happens every year. Yeah. And the next thing is I want to start to have a positive relationship with the paper. So if they ask for your interview, your picture, or answer these 5 questions or whatever, I want to make sure that I provide something instead of just a blank when that issue comes out. So if that's campaigning, then that's it. And then in a small community, opportunities to engage with community at ball games and the grocery store aisle and church parking lots. So,
okay. Now, Steve, I think you described that at least in the past, and at least in one school district, there were kind of some inside. There was a group that kind of perpetuated itself, and not as much turnover as you would have liked to have seen. So I'd like to know, in your experience and in Tom's experience, have you seen the variety of people, of interests, of expertise on the school board that you would like? Are these people coming from, are there many teachers on the school board? Are there many people who might have narrower interests, or are we getting the broad spectrum that represents the whole community? What do you think there?
I think you sort of your caveat at the outset of this is not, we're not going to solve the problems that are faced by school boards today, but it does bring to mind, in response to your question, Leon, that one of the fears I think we have now is that folks with narrow or specific interests on particular issues seem to be running for school boards based on that issue. And that's really contrary to, I think, the history of public school boards and public education, because I think that, and Tom, you would be much better positioned to talk about this, but in my limited experience, there was usually a fairly good array. I think earlier on, probably not the kind of minority representation that should have existed. And I think over time that's been corrected. And you could certainly quarrel with some elements about that. But generally, it attracts a cross section of people bringing different skills.
Okay.
My experience.
Oh, that's good to hear. Yep.
All that I would have to add to that is, there's a scale of people that are one end that really want all the best interests to be a good school board member, support the district, support administration, support their children's teaching mission. And that's 90%, 95%, whatever of people that run it for school board. But there is a small contingent, you're right, that whether it's through a stealth campaign, a write-in campaign, or whatever, come in as single issue single issue candidates. And I've seen it in a variety of places, but those people need to realize that they are one of 7 votes, and they may think they're going to change the district and fire the superintendent and all that. Well, it might be a 6-1 vote, but you can't do that on your own. And it's what I've seen, that those people usually spend a unhappy term on the school board, and then they self-select and they get off. So that's been my experience with that so far, and we'll see how it goes with this election.
I hope that continues.
Is there any training for members of a school board? How do you bring yourself up to speed when you join this organization?
In my experience, no. Although the State Association of School Boards, I think, hold some workshops and things of that nature, but it's pretty much on the job, in my experience. Tom, again, your recent experience might tell us more.
I did 3 things. I'm a little biased there with Iowa Association of School Boards, but there is a lot of training that's available for district meetings, as well as the annual convention through Iowa ASB. That's a formal method there. The second one was an informal method in that my superintendent coached me to learn at the knee of the business manager about school finance in this particular instance, and absorb all you can. I won't know all of it, but I'll have an inkling of what it involves. So getting that to the source of the people in the school administration that can educate you. And the third thing is, as I was on the school board for multiple years, and in years when I was not running, but there were a lot of candidates that were running, I offered to have a coaching session for all the candidates before the election. And they always all showed up. And I would have my agenda of things to talk about, and then I would turn it over to the business manager to bring up their slate of things to talk about. So it was an educational, it wasn't long, but it was equally shared with everybody so that they could make wise decisions about what they want to do when they get on board, and confirm that they want to continue to run for the board. So those were the three that I kind of evolved through time, and where I left it when I got off school board.
I wonder if I could add something, if it's okay, Linn.
Yep.
I think one of the challenges, particularly when you have lay people, to be sure, in education, coming into a position of dealing with professionals that understand education so thoroughly, that I believe it's always a challenge to encourage school board members to speak openly, take risks in asking questions, maybe even acting like sometimes they don't know the answer, because that creates an inclination in public boards particularly that I found over time that's concerning. And that is they tend to want to maybe make decisions out of public view, as opposed to having an open and small d democratic discourse about issues, and be okay with a community that's going to be accepting of the fact that, you know, you're not an educational professional and you may make a comment that might otherwise be criticized, but most times people are they want people there willing to ask good questions about education, be willing to say, I don't know when I don't know something, and represent citizens.
Steve, that to me is culture and tone. And yes, when new people get on a board or new administration comes on, what tone do they set? Is it a welcoming, open one? And what's the culture of the organization? It's just like culture in buildings. What's the culture that principals have with their teachers and the kids in the building? But it's hard to identify what culture is, but you can sense it walking through a building or meeting with a group really quickly, whether it's good or bad. So that's the culture thing. Thanks, Steve.
Sure.
Let's talk about the kinds of decisions a school board makes. I'm supposing that you're talking about facilities and budgets and staffing, and who makes the final decisions on these kinds of questions, whether we're going to, build a new arts building, or who's going to be hired and so on. Does the superintendent sit with the school board? Who's there with you making decisions? What kind of decisions are you making?
I think Tom would agree that if I remember anything about the primary task of a school board member is hiring a superintendent. That's something where you're deeply involved with personnel decisions, a personnel decision. But from that point on, it's much different. It's certainly policy matters. It's not getting interfering, if you will, in the day-to-day, yet staying familiar with what's happening so that when policy questions come up, you're prepared to respond to them. Does that make sense, Tom?
Oh, yes. The main point is the main point. You focus on the hiring, the coaching, and the evaluation of the superintendent, and try to establish a good relationship there. Decisions of that level, Leon, are collaborative all up and down. I mean, okay. Usually, sometimes, a lot of years, facilities committees of school boards are just 3 people, and you talk about, what renovation you're going to do during the summer. But when you go into purchase of land and buying and building a building, I mean, that's, at least building a building, that might be the whole school board being involved with that type of facilities discussion. But then you need to make sure that you have open meetings and you have everything posted correctly, and that you invite the public for that input and so on. But if once you get the treadmill, that flywheel effect going there, when you get some momentum towards whatever that next building is going to be, or new building, or what you're going to do there, once that gets going in a community, that takes on a life of its own, and it's very impressive. So I've seen it work, and I've been a part of it. It's a neat concept, but it's all got to be collaborative and recognize that, yeah, you got one employee that you have an evaluation for, and that is the superintendent, and maybe a dotted line relationship with your business manager, depending upon the district, but know your proper role. Don't be telling teachers and principals how they need to run their place, and teachers how they're supposed to operate, as long as they're within the normal parameters. So that's something that you need to stay in your lane in and recognize the proper role of a school board member.
Alrighty. Now let's talk about your interaction with city government, your interaction with constituents in the community. So the meetings are, at least some of the meetings are open. Parents can, or anybody, parent or no parent, can sit in and listen in on meetings. There's a question session, right? You have some informal after-hours communication with constituents in the district. Big budget decisions must require the participation of the city government, not just the school district. So talk about your ties, your interactions with these other groups here.
Sure. Well, first thing to talk about was the open versus closed meetings. I took a lot of satisfaction in not having very many closed meetings. There's like 5 reasons you can have a closed meeting legally, and there aren't many things you can get sued on if you're a school board member. One of them is not having open meetings and or trying to do a floating meeting. Meet with 2 or 3 people, a minority in one group here at one coffee shop, and then another group of school board members in another coffee shop. But that is a floating meeting, and that's against the sunshine concepts of open meetings. But when you do have a topic that involves a closed meeting, whether it's superintendent evaluation, student suspension or expulsion, purchase of land, issues with the teacher and so on that are rise to a major level, those are the appropriate in closed meetings, and that confidence needs to be maintained. But I support totally 150% the concept of open meetings, and that's the way it should be.
Okay.
And Tom, amen.
Yeah.
And I went on to work in the legislature, particularly with regard to sunshine laws and open meetings, having found out, just a quick story, when I went on the school board, the Cedar Rapids School Board met in advance of each meeting at the Roosevelt Hotel and had a fine dinner. And during that fine dinner, the agenda was thrashed out, decisions generally made, and then we went to public session and made a formal vote. It was a most unpleasant meeting, and when one board member objects to that, it's hard for the board to continue. So that didn't last long. But the open meetings concept, and there's a recent a bit of controversy that's arisen in a local school board where they've adopted apparently a policy where speak with one voice. And that is that school board members were reluctant to respond to questions from the public and the press because they felt they should speak with the voice of the board president only. I think that's a real dangerous sort of slope that because our role as individual board members is to always interact, talk with, respond to questions to, and what have you. And your voice may indeed be different than the others. And the more people see different voices, the more they respect the kind of interaction that goes on at a board level. So these are really important questions and perilous ones, because school boards over the years have always gotten into trouble by sort of making decisions out of the public eye, I think, with just sort of the normal human inclination of wanting to not look stupid in front of the public.
I have seen what you're talking about, Steve. I've noticed that, and that troubles me dramatically too. We want to be a culture, public governance of allowing public comments, and that it's framed, it's 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it is, and that it's conducive to the public. not at the end of a 2 to 3 hour school board or meeting, that it's on the front end of a meeting and it is true public comment. Recognize it's got to be within the scope of, it's not, if you want something fixed in public comment, it can't be addressed, it can't be fixed. It's not an agenda item, but at least give the public an opportunity to state their claim. So I know what you're referencing, Steve, and it troubles me too that we're going down that slippery slope.
Okay, we're nearing the end of our allotted time, so I'm going to ask you to give us some final words. You might want to talk about big changes you've seen over the years in a few words, or where our audience might go to learn more, or encourage our audience to learn more. Think about what you'd like to say imparting to our audience here. Who would like to go first here?
Oh, I'm happy to take a shot at it if you don't mind.
Just a minute or two. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, sure. And while we're not going to be talking about it tonight because it takes a lot of conversation, I think without acknowledging this national trend now for both partisan and sort of social dynamite items coming to school boards, and school board members even feeling threatened, this absence of civility is of great concern, and maybe even goes on to election officials and local elections and what have you. I think that what we talked about tonight more than once is the laudable service on the part of citizens, of well-meaning citizens, that ought not to be subjected to the abuse of people who have an axe to grind. As opposed to what Tom and I were just talking about, the welcoming of good faith debate on subjects that parents and everybody ought to be interested in. But it's that line is blurred, and I think we have to be guarded against that. But it's such a deep question of civility in our society, and I hope that those larger questions are dealt with through faith-based organizations and other ways.
Okay, Tom, you've got a minute here.
2 points. Legislators told me 15, 18 years ago, an implied responsibility that I had as a school board president was to keep peace in the valley. And you don't see that on a job description, but there's a lot to it. And that means doesn't necessarily mean don't rock the boat, but just recognize that you are the point person and keep peace in the valley. And the second thing, and I'm going to go back, circle around to the front, to the invitation of leadership and governance and getting involved with groups like this. Don't underestimate the power of an invitation. I remember who invited me to be on the school board, why, where I was at, and I am so glad that person did. So I have done that several times since then, inviting people to get involved with this organization or that organization. And there's power in invitation.
Well, thank you both for a great conversation today. And I hope you and our audience have learned something that's interesting and valuable to you, and appreciate your neighbors who are doing this work for us. Maybe some of you will consider serving in this role, learning more about what's happening in our schools, in our communities. Great to have you both here. Great to meet you, Steve, for the first time, and good luck in your election there, Tom.
We'll find out in an hour.
I don't know how I know, but I know you've got at least one vote, okay? So, and see you all next time on Ethical Perspectives on the News. Thanks in our audience for joining us. Goodbye.
Thank you, Leon.